I have a question for you. If you call a book an apple, does that change what it is? If you call a bedroom activity a lifestyle, does that make it so? Here's a better question. Can you have a debate or even a conversation if one party insists on changing the very definitions of the words used so that the definitions are no longer consistent or even usable? So that a block of wood is defined as a fruit, a ballpoint pen is defined as a power tool, or motor oil is defined as writing paper? Well, that's what's happened and has continued to be promoted the last 50 years or so. You can tell that the United States is a society whose sexual mores were established by religious Puritans. Sexual hypocrisy is the foundation of all matters revolving around sexuality in this culture, but then again, that's because hypocrisy lies at the very heart of American culture in general. Homosexuals are about 2, at most 3% of the society, and even that figure is largely overblown. But even with so small a percentage, one would think they were beneath the need to even comment on, right? Well, less than 1% of the population owns nearly all the wealth in the U.S. Would you claim that it's possible to ignore them too? You cannot claim sexuality as an identity. Let's get that on the table first. With the exceptions of prostitutes and porn stars, nobody has sex as their life's calling. And even a hooker is smart enough not to define herself by it. Okay, gay marriage is the law of the land, at least on paper, but so what? The gays are as angry now as they were before the Supreme Court decided to play social engineers. And why is that? Because the gays have lied from the very beginning, especially to themselves. Gay marriage was never the issue. Neither were gay Boy Scout counselors or gay priests. The mirage the gay community has been chasing but will never catch is social acceptance. But no court can force people to approve of you. The gays are even now trying to use the courts to bludgeon businesses and churches into participating in the gay lifestyle. But there's only so many phony, trumped-up lawsuits you can file against pizza parlors who refuse to cater your lesbian wedding. That's what this is really about. Or do you think it's some coincidence that there would be jihad against anyone who refuses to promote the lifestyle seems to have petered out after their most recent stunts? The gays think that they can use the law to force people to like them and to purge anyone who doesn't, and they're starting to realize now that the math simply doesn't work. At this point, they would be wise to start thinking of what they can do to shield themselves from the backlash that is surely coming. The reason for the rancor between many in the heterosexual community and the gays is because of the values we espouse and how we express them. Heterosexuals are sexually modest as a rule. Sure, Muslims want women to cover their heads, but up until the 1950s, women in America did the same thing. And we all agree that public fornication should be prohibited. Moreover, we believe in not offending other people's sensibilities. This is why heterosexuals frown on public displays of affection. Holding hands is fine, kissing is permissible, but slobbering all over one another's faces is not. Homosexuals, however, don't seem to feel that way. Too many among them have a kinky need for public nudity and sex in public. This is not some minor overstepping of prudish societal norms. This is a blatant provocation. Now, being provocative has its place, so long as it's serving a greater, higher purpose. But being offensive just for the sake of being offensive is never okay. The crime is not a mere violation of some standard of good taste. It's far deeper than that. The crime is incivility. Sexuality is supposed to be in the bedroom. It's a personal, private thing for a reason. And that's a large part of the antipathy towards the gay pride movement. They are trying to violate all sexual norms. That's what their movement is based upon and promotes itself through. Starting in the 1960s, the social acceptance of homosexuality started to be seriously debated. The homosexuals had one major rhetorical problem, though. There was no compelling argument in their favor. So, since they couldn't win the debate, nor could they redefine the terms of the debate, they've since chosen to focus on redefining the words themselves, so as to shoehorn homosexuality into the traditional and accepted definition of normalcy. We've seen an all-out war on words, such as gender, sex, feminine, and masculine. Our mistake was in treating this duplicitous scam with anything other than the contempt it deserves, as if there was something basically valid about pretending masculinity can or should include women, or that femininity can or should include men. These have all been rhetorical dodges by people whose goal wasn't to defend a point of view, rather to muddy the waters of the discussion. They got what they wanted when we started dignifying this linguistic schizophrenia. What's that old saying? Never argue with a madman, because before long no one will be able to tell which one of you is mad. I suppose the reason heterosexuality is taken for granted is because it's an essential part of being human. There are a lot of variables to our existence, but the one constant that we all share is that we are all the product of the sexual union of a man and a woman. All the sodomy or cunnilingus in the world will never produce a child. Heterosexuality can never be defined as obscene or wrong because it's the only thing that every human being on the planet has in common. It is the unchangeable constant of the human experience. There have been whole periods, mostly in Africa, where there were no wars, periods of famine, scientific advancement, terrible social and political regression, but throughout it all, no matter what people were or were not doing, it's a guarantee that men and women were procreating. Heterosexuality is the reason we're all here, and our only hope for having a future. No amount of philosophical enlightenment or scientific achievement can take its place. Even if human cloning were to ever become a reality, the removal of the mandatory uniting of a man and woman destroys much of what it means to be a human being. Cloning would give us human cattle, people produced on an assembly line, and we're not robots. We're not cattle either. We're higher than that. Far higher. But it takes a man and a woman to create that, not two adults trying to rationalize and prop up their sexual habit. This has always been a source of enormous frustration for those who took their sexual kink out of the bedroom and decided to make it part of the society. And their blatant public sexual vulgarity shouldn't surprise anyone. When you define your whole life solely in terms of your genitals and what you do with them, that's the only trick you know. Gays like to throw around the talking point that they are, on average, smarter than heterosexuals. I, for one, find that hard to believe, though I must admit it does have one scintilla of verisimilitude, because in order to ignore the facts on heterosexuality and the obvious self-contradictions of the lifestyle, you've got to be capable of some amazing mental gymnastics. As a lifestyle, the gay lobby tells us that they're no different than heterosexuals. I take serious issue with that. You can find plenty of civilizations with no homosexuals. You can find eras in history where even those societies which were once or are today full of homosexuals had none. You cannot, however, find any civilization anywhere on the planet at any time in all of human history that was free of heterosexuals. You can pretend that gender is something other than biological in origin, but so what? White so-called biologists wasted hundreds of years claiming black people were physically inferior to whites, genetically inferior to whites. But that didn't make even one letter of their lying words true. These types of verbal games are typical of white supremacy. When they lose the debate, rather than examine their own position so as to deal with the flaws, they instead seek to redefine the terms of the debate altogether. Because for them, it's not about truth. It's about winning. Anti-heterosexual bigots like Dan Savage and racist lunatics like Milo Snuffleupagus are pretty typical of what you find as the movers and shakers of the gay movement. And one has to ask serious questions about some of the most prominent black people in media, many of whom are homosexuals and lesbians, and many of whom are today in relationships with white partners. Lee Daniels is with a white Jewish man, same for Don Lemon. Robin Roberts is involved with a white woman, as is Wanda Sykes. And those are just the famous homosexuals. Practically every black gay person in America has been involved with a white person. This is because the gay community is small, very small. And no matter what they may try to tell you, there's a reason why they're constantly trying to convince heterosexuals that we must be secretly gay too. It's because they are desperate to expand their dating pool. And can you blame them? In life, there's a world of opportunities. Unless you're gay. All you get if you're homosexual is the one gay bar in your town and the one or two all-gay get-togethers somewhere in Florida. And when you've defined your entire existence around a specific sexual activity, it gets pretty old pretty quick. Gays cannot create more gays, so they're trying to recruit heterosexuals into the lifestyle. But as Brittany Griner proved after she tried her hand at being a lesbian, she eventually quit the lifestyle and has now found a nice man to settle down with. A white man, of course. I'm not making that up. Brittany is with a white man now, and she has taken her ex-girlfriend Glory Johnson to court for child support. Even though the child isn't biologically Glory's, she's still going to have to pay for it anyway. Well, I suppose ladies' night at the local lesbian bar just got a little less crowded. And don't try to figure out the Gordian knot of legalism that Griner is using to force her ex-girlfriend to pay for a child she had nothing to do with producing. Heterosexuality makes sense. Homosexuality largely does not. Gay is simply not analogous to heterosexual. A heterosexual couple doesn't have to bring in some anonymous third party into their relationship for the sole purpose of being a sperm donor or pregnancy surrogate. A third party who they want to be rid of without a trace as a matter of course. Relationships matter, starting with the people in them. How can you have a stable relationship when you deliberately bring in a third person who neither party is attracted to, who neither party even wants around? That's just using people. You can claim that it's altruistic all you want, that doesn't change what it is. The sperm or womb donor isn't there to be a part of the relationship. Their sole purpose is to carry out one biological function one time and then go away. Gay culture depends upon treating people as disposable. To see a man as nothing but a source of sperm or a woman merely as a walking womb is wrong, and you cannot defend it. And the children who are produced are deliberately kept from their sperm or womb donors, though nobody seems to want to ask what impact it would have on society if you had entire generations of children raised under these circumstances. Just look at what the last 3 generations of bastard baby makers have done to the black community if you want an example of the wreckage that would ensue. And this is how the gay couples claim to have children. There's no way on earth that this can be healthy. Not for a community, much less for a nation. Everything about the gays' attempts to rationalize their lifestyle is convoluted and makes absolutely no sense. The tortured reasoning they use to explain away what we all know gender to mean, the pretzeled logic that tries and fails to claim that a woman can be legitimately masculine or that a man can be legitimately feminine, the verbal gymnastics they require simply to say that they're not sure they resent their parents for having born them in the first place. Their arguments are like cheap wine. They'll say whatever they think expedient at the moment. I always laugh when one of them pulls out the old "I was born this way" line. Never mind the fact that that's the exact same rhetorical dodge that pedophiles use. The homosexuals use very careful wording, shall we say, because they don't want to be specific. They know the source of homosexuality full well, and they know damn well that it's not genetic. So why say that they were born this way? They want the benefit of claiming they couldn't help being homosexual without the reasonable examination that this claim would ordinarily entail. There is no gay gene, so you can't say you were born homosexual because it's not inherently genetic. If you insist that it is anyway, then you have to then concede that homosexuality is a genetic defect, no different than cleft palate or albinism. So, are the gays willing to agree that their lifestyle is in fact the result of a genetic aberration? You can't claim to be born a certain way unless it's the result of genes, either working correctly or incorrectly. So which one is it? Because science has already proven that there is no gay gene, so that rules out nature as a cause of homosexuality. All that's left then is nurturing. And as we all know, most homosexuals, not all, but certainly most, were molested as children, or at the very least exposed to things that they ought not have been exposed to at a very early age. They didn't understand what happened to them and still don't, which explains why they're defending it, even though they themselves can't explain it. Gays are clearly rebelling against what or whom I don't care. Suffice it to say, they're entitled to their lifestyle, and I'm content to leave them alone. All alone. Problem is, they're not leaving the heterosexual community alone. They're on a jihad to drag everyone in the heterosexual community into the lifestyle, and they have absolutely no intention on letting it be voluntary. All you have to do is listen to the leading voices in the gay movement, and you see readily that the gay movement, whether by accident or intent, has turned into a clumsy ploy to stamp out heterosexuality and to define homosexuality as the only sexual norm. I suppose next they will then become a loose aggregate of lesbians and homosexuals who will agree to be sperm and womb donors for one another. This is not idle talk, by the way. This is the actual rhetoric that you find being thrown around by the leading advocates of the gay lifestyle. Keep in mind, there have been plenty of European and Asian societies full of homosexuals who became a numerical majority. Greece, Rome, even Japan in many places, and in all those cases, their gay empire collapsed. Homosexuality is not equal to heterosexuality because it is unsustainable. The gay plan to perpetuate themselves turns people into nothing more than human breeders. Most people do not like and will not cooperate with a system that forces them to father or mother children who they will never see and who will be taught to pretend that their own parents didn't exist. Relationships matter. This is an aspect of heterosexuality that you will never see the gays tackle because they can't. For a group who is constantly wrapped up in their emotions, they have no place for attachment in the long term, it seems. As Brittany Griner has proven, if you care about the sperm donor and he's willing to commit to you, then he stops being just a sperm donor. And who needs two wombs in the picture then? The gay claptrap about how they would like to see humanity perpetuate itself under an all-gay regime is a total fraud. But for the sake of argument, even if it was practical, it would still collapse under its own weight because people don't like to be used and discarded, even if its purpose is to help them not have to admit that they made a mistake somewhere on the road of life. This is why every gay majority society eventually deteriorated and fell apart, because the gays themselves decided it just wasn't worth it. Now, if you don't care about the perpetuation of the human race, then I guess everything that I've said has made no impression on you. But if you do care, then it means everything. Humoring some group by playing along with their clearly insincere rhetoric about wanting equality is an exercise damned to failure and a waste of time that we can't afford. Humanity means something, and it cannot be whatever you feel is convenient to define it or redefine it as. This isn't some thought exercise, this is our lives and our existence on this planet. Monogamous heterosexuality is the only lifestyle that ensures the continuation of the human race and avoids the inevitable confusion that immediately ensues when you try to incorporate your preferred sexual kink. And this includes incest, polyandry, and polygamy too. And while we're on that subject, we all know the scam. You have one woman who the guy actually cares about, and the rest who are merely his harem. Or do you think it's an accident that as these men get older, their latest wives get younger? Yes, societies can be made to tolerate all manner of aberrations, but do these things help us or hurt us? That's what this debate is really all about. We all have our preferences, but when a preference becomes the end-all and be-all, then it's a problem. This is not a matter of what works best. This is about what works, period. Neither biology nor human nature is compatible with homosexuality. Sure, heterosexuals have their issues as individuals and sometimes as a group, but at least heterosexuals will have a next generation who will try to get it right. Homosexuality arose from emotion, as has the gay agenda. Now, we could just wave it off and say, let this play itself out as it has historically. Allow this lie to fail and fall apart on its own. We could say that. But when people are wrong and leading others astray and trying to pull you into the mess, it's no virtue to simply shake your head and say this too will pass. Because, believe it or not, this does matter. So until the gay movement stops pretending that they want to be left alone and finally admit that they're determined to force the lifestyle upon the heterosexual community as well, we're going to continue to forward our argument.